Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila, you get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky. Like always, we find fascinating people inside and outside the world of HR to give you the most recent on what's happening in HR data, analytics, process, and technology. Today, at the HR Technology Conference, the 2022 HR Technology Conference in beautiful Mandalay Bay Convention Center, Las Vegas, Nevada, we have with us Tim Sackett. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, David.
It's my pleasure. You guys have remembered Tim. Tim is one of the thought leaders in the world of HR technology around recruiting and ATS. And we've had conversations with him in the past. In fact, I think it was last year at this time.
Yeah, right around that time.
Yeah. So, Tim, the one fun thing no one knows about you.
Oh, wow. You just got me like out in the middle of nowhere. I think the one fun thing for me is like, I have this belief that everybody should have one, like a karaoke song they can pull out they'd be really good at.
Yeah.
I don't have mine yet, but I'm working on that.
That's
like,
cool.
I think you should like, you sometimes you just randomly run into like something and you're like, oh, it's karaoke night.
You trip over and fall and you run into a karaoke night.
And it's like bad karaoke for like, and I'm like, I want to have one song I can just go kill it. And then like, oh, do another. And like, nope, that's you got my
like
one.
Don't Stop Believing or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that's the key though, too. Is you have to have the crowd. You have to get a sing along. Someone in the crowd's going to join in.
Yeah. Well, Piano Man from Billy Joel.
Yeah.
That's a great sing along song.
Yeah.
La da di di da di dum. So the topic we've chosen today is 2022, 2023. What happened in 2022? What surprised Tim in 2022 around HR technology in the recruiting and ATS space? Let's first start, Tim, with 2022. What were you expecting going in?
Hey everybody, Tim Sackett, host of HR Famous, a new podcast on the Redefining network. Am I famous? No, I'm HR famous. My wife says I'm a micro celebrity and 13 HR ladies around the world want their picture with me, which I think is funny. So, hey, what do we talk about on the pod? We talk about all the dumb stuff we do in HR in any given day, week, month, and we have fun with it, and we have some great guests. Come check us out. We're not famous. We're HR famous.
I knew we were going to have a hard time hiring. And I think that that expectation came through. I think the surprise, I wasn't surprised by it just because, I've been like trying to, for a long time, like go, hey, we have a problem. I think 10 years ago, I wrote a blog post and I gotten some really bad feedback at the time, which I was saying HR should start paying their employees to have sex. Meaning we need more babies.
Right.
Because we have a demographic issue on the horizon that was going to kick our butts.
Yep.
And people were just like, oh my God, how could you ever say HR should encourage their employees to have sex? And you're like, come on. Like
by the way, there are countries that actually do this.
Exactly. Yeah. And actually pay them. Right. Yes. And I was espousing some of those same kind of things. Like we should be bonusing. Right. And so in 2019, we had historic low 3.7% unemployment. We had 5-6 million open jobs and it was super hard to hire. Pandemic hits. We all know what happened. We had this big giant V and all of a sudden we come back and we're like, oh my gosh, why is it so hard to hire? When is everybody going to come back to work? And you're like, we didn't have anybody to work before.
Right.
And then we had obviously major shifts that happened demographically with 3 years of baby boomers kind of leaving early, women leaving early, close the borders. So no immigration.
To close the borders. That was the thing I was going to bring up.
Yeah. Like, so we literally, so then if you put all of those things together and if you use conservative numbers, we might have like taken 11 million people out of the workforce.
Yes.
And then that speaks to the additional, 5-6 million jobs open, the 3.5 like unemployment.
%, yeah.
And so people are like, well, it's a recession and a downturn. I mean, as we're talking today in mid-September, unemployment numbers are down again.
Right. Job growth as well.
Yeah. Other countries are kicking our butts in terms of their immigration policy, and we're still sitting on the sidelines.
Yep.
And so I think,
which is remarkable with this administration too. You'd think that it was different.
That's the hard part, right? You go, hey, the people that usually support immigration are in charge of all the branches.
Right now. Yeah. Well, with the midterms coming up, it's going to be weird. Yeah. But to that point, that's what I don't understand. Economic demographers, and I'm an economic demographer for my training.
Yeah.
We could have told you years ago what was going to happen from a demographic bubble.
Yeah.
It was obvious.
Yes.
Nothing was going to change dramatically unless immigration changed.
Yeah. Japan knew what their problem was for 20 straight years and still are just starting to make some changes to turn that.
Right.
It's hard.
Right. Well, we also have a really big problem, which is the kind of the death of the traditional family. Yeah. Which is causing fertility rates to fall as well.
Yep.
Divorce is at all-time highs. And, let's just say what it is. We need more births.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk around politicization of people's bodies. And I'm not trying to go there. I'm just saying that unless we get more births, we're going to have a big problem trying to fill roles.
There's not enough humans in the United States. And, obviously in the world, there's enough humans. Some of that's just in the wrong spots. And that's why you say immigration really is the only silver bullet we have to pull, the lever we have to pull.
That's a short-term problem.
Could be. Yeah. I mean, the long term, again, depending, right? We still thankfully are in a country where a lot of people want to come. And so that's one of the things. But how do you encourage, if it's the birth replacement rate is 2.1 and we're at 1.7, that to get it back to 2.1 even, and that's just replacement.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking, well, we need to do more than that. So we know.
But by the way, I'm sorry, one thing though, it's replacement without pandemics.
Yes.
When you start introducing pandemics,
it's probably,
and you have people who have higher mortality rates.
Yeah.
We've had very high mortality rates lately.
Oh, for sure.
That causes replacement to be higher then.
Yeah. Well, we've seen the backup in the average age, for livelihood for both men and women in the U.S., which is a rare thing to happen, right? In a modern world and in a rich world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
that we're in. But we know that we're not going to change that. So then automation, robotics, all of that stuff comes into play because, you see this with everyday service jobs. More and more, you're a kiosk when you go into a McDonald's versus a real person and all of those things, right?
Right. Or, even go to a CVS or a Walgreens now. When you go to supermarkets or you go to CVS or Walmart, even here in Vegas, they have the self-service checkout line.
Yeah.
That they've replaced the person who does the checkout. You're that person now who does the checkout. And they have one person manning 5 or 6 different channels, whereas it used to be one person on each. That's a real difference in how things are getting done in a supermarket.
And that's a real life today example. If you really think about in the future where that could be and all those other things that are being taken over by automation, that's really the only, again, it's one of the only ways we're ever going to get out of this in the short term, even though a lot of that stuff isn't short term because there's a whole kind of adoption and build and but technology tends to come up and help us out with some of that stuff. So one fun thing you just brought up that I just remembered is you can walk into some Amazon and Apple stores,
purchase something and never talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Never, ever talk to a human being. You can go up, buy something. Yeah, somebody might give you a bag or give you a receipt, but you don't actually really have to interact. You could just literally walk out the door legally because you paid for it.
Yep.
And to your point, the technologies are there. You may need to have people who service those technologies, right? There's NFC going on there. There's other things to make sure you're just not stealing.
Yeah.
But the person who is an unskilled laborer or relatively unskilled, who used to be the checkout person there, is now gone.
Yeah.
And by the way, unskilled labor is going through the roof in other areas of the economy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's always going to be some of that. We even take a look at it from the recruiting standpoint. I think people ask me all the time, what's the future of recruiting? And for years and years, it was always, the conversation was around technology. It was always like, oh, well, here's the new tech and here's this. And this is how it's going to, change the recruiter life. The future of recruiting is a person having a real conversation with the candidate. And that's it. That's your job as a recruiter.
Wait. That sounds like Back to the Future.
Exactly. Difference being, we're using technology now for all these tactical pieces where previously in the old school recruiting decades ago, you would have to call and call and call and call, and then you eventually get someone to call you back or whatever. And you might have, if you were lucky, 10, 20 conversations in a week, you know. Now, with the way the technology and scheduling and automation and all this is, we theoretically could say, hey, every half hour on the hour, we're going to have a candidate for you to have a conversation with.
Right.
Now, again, we know the burnout there would be really high, but the future of recruiting becomes, who is the recruiter that can get you the quickest to trust you with their career and build that quick relationship and understand, like, is this somebody we want to have interview or date or whatever. Right. So, so that becomes, and that's what's the funny thing is like, I think a lot of organizations have their talent acquisition teams built around people that administer a recruiting process.
Yes.
And so you're going to have this huge transformation of, we need to bring in closers.
Right.
The technology is going to be invisible. It's going to do its thing. It's going to bring candidates to you that are warm and excited and ready.
Right.
And now you have to talk them into why us, right?
Totally different skill set.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, can that really be trained, or is it a different type of person? Is it more of a salesperson because they have to have that closing, not only mentality, but hunger?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, I also think it's somebody that is a true believer in your brand, right?
Yeah.
That becomes another piece of that. So it's someone that can close, but they also, because I mean, if you get somebody to trust you with their career, one of the most biggest decisions they'll ever make in their life, you have to have someone that has a pretty deep empathy around that whole entire thing, right? And traditional sales would be like, no, just close to get them there.
Right.
This is a little different. I always tell people, because people say, oh, recruiting is sales. And I'm like, it's not exactly.
No.
Because you think about, I'm selling you a car. You come in, you want the car, you have the money, you're going to buy the car. That's transactional.
Right.
Here is, I'm like, you want the job. And if it was that, you would just say, hey, I want that job and I'm going to go to work. And that's the sales cycle, right? But we're going, well, let's put it back into the car analogy. You come in, you want to buy a Cadillac, and I'm going to go, I'm not sure if you're Cadillac material, David.
But by the way, that's actually happened to me.
And you
walk into a BMW dealer and see the looks you get.
Yeah, but no, but
that versus this versus shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah, but thinking about that, in that process, it becomes crystal clear to say, oh, it's not all sales,
right?
Because that's a very like one-to-one transactional. I'm going to try to entice you to come in, and I'm definitely, if you want to buy, I'm selling.
Right.
This is, I want you to buy. I want you to buy. I want you to buy. I no longer want you to buy.
But let's break that down a little bit, because as we get more, I guess, legislation around pay transparency.
Yeah.
And there'll be more self-selection, and we're going to find people who are, I guess, either more driven toward a role or say, I'm not even going to apply because that's not the money I want for that job.
Yeah.
Won't we get a more streamlined approach so it does become more of a transactional thing?
I mean, I think in the low skill, no skill world, for sure.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
I still think, at the higher skill level side, you're going to have, if you want the best talent to come work for you versus where they're at or versus somebody else, there's still going to have to be a little bit of that.
Virtually no conversations anyways right now, is there?
I mean, I think there's still, it's a hard thing to give up for a hiring manager to say, I'm just going to have somebody show up.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, and I've put this, and written about this. I think a lot of these companies would be better off just to literally, the way they select should be like a lottery.
Yeah.
Like, why are you even interviewing? Because when you put the bias in and stuff like that, you're no better than anything. You might as well just randomly say, hey, we have 10 people that want the job, and we're picking 2, 7, and 10. You come to work tomorrow.
Right.
You're going to have the success is exactly the same of you going through an interview process.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we were talking about using assessments on the front end to make sure that there were the right skills necessary to complete the hire, right? Yeah. And actually, I take it back, not at the end of hiring, at the beginning of the hiring process, before someone actually applies. Have them go through and test out to see if you should even gather their data to be able to be put into the process.
Yeah.
Because the moment you get all of their data, then they're a record in your system. And if they're not really serious or they don't really have all those skills, why bother putting them in as record in your system?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's always that, they might not be somebody that we want now, but maybe later. But you and I both know the reality is these ATS has become a dead database of millions of candidates for a lot of these companies because they don't really utilize kind of a, marketing automation to go in and revive some of that talent that's in there.
Totally lost opportunity, by the way.
For most companies, yeah. I tell people the biggest resource, the underutilized resource they have in their company is their database. They spend all this money getting people to apply, attract them, make them go through their process, jump through hoops, and then they just sit there and, for the most part, the vast majority, 99% of them will never get the job, and they just sit there as dead inventory.
So can I tug on that thread for a couple seconds? Because I'm a data guy.
Yeah.
You have so much data. You have so much insight as to not just the candidates and the resumes that you have in the process, but what their disposition was. And usually it's going to be 10 seconds after they apply. Just send them a note saying, hey, you've got really great credentials, but we're not going to go forward with you. But why isn't that becomes the first place we look, other than employees? I mean, I would think we would go look for employees in the recruiting process first. But okay, besides that, why wouldn't we look at that data source? Why invest in the money to go out and do the posting and spend the money on postings when you have all that data just sitting there waiting for you?
There's a psychological factor of, hey, they're in our database, and if we didn't hire them, they must be garbage.
But why? If they've never gone through the vetting process, or even if they've gone through the vetting process, the vetting process may be better now.
The other piece of this is you're talking about outbound recruiting versus inbound recruiting.
Yes.
So it's like
you're right.
90% of the recruiting that's done, and maybe even larger than that, could be 95% is going to be inbound. It's like, I post a job, you show interest, and that becomes a very easy tactical process to go through, right? Either we like you, we don't like you, and then we move on to somebody else who's interested.
Right.
For me to go after people who are I wouldn't say they're uninterested in us. They just don't even know if there's interest or not. So I have to figure that out first and try to capture you then and talk you into it. That's heavy lifting recruiting versus post and pray, post and pray, post and pray.
But not to sound contrarian, because you know much more about recruiting process than I do. It takes an email.
No, yeah, for sure.
Or a reach out.
Yeah.
And by the way, that does not need to be a person sitting at Outlook doing it. It could be here's a job that we're going to look for.
And I think there's a lot of technology out there in the landscape that people are starting to use, like matching technology and then AI automatically reaches out, catches interest.
Right.
And they don't just reach out to people in your database, but also in that overall kind of, micro landscape that you have around whatever that might be. It could be you have 10 employees that have this background. We should be asking them as well, right? Who do you know? Or maybe even internally, like, hey, there's jobs open. Would you be interested? Like you talked about, like, I think that's one of the bigger kind of retention things that companies kind of use as well. We'd rather see somebody leave us and go someplace else than us like, oh, hey, maybe we should give them the opportunity to go kind of work.
I don't understand at all.
I do believe, like, in talent acquisition especially, and we could argue probably in HR, we are data rich but information poor. We still aren't very good around the insight side, right? We have, we might have more data points than any other system within our company.
Yes.
And yet we still haven't really figured out how to utilize that really well. And again, like, that's one of the things I see here at the show is we're starting to really see the power of BI coming into a lot of these like systems. And so that's, when we take a look at 2023 and beyond, to me, we're going to start to redefine like success of HR and talent acquisition in a completely new way, because what we've been defining success as has been the same thing for like literally decades.
Yes.
Days to fill, employee engagement, all these kind of things that, have really zero correlation back to operations. And I think so we'll start to see much more black and white data driven, like kind of measures of success, you know.
That's a hope for maturity for not just, and I'm not going to blame the recruiting function for this, because a lot of times people put pressure on the recruiting world if we're not hiring fast enough. So
for sure,
they just totally tense them out.
But there's it's a false correlation of faster is better.
Right. If you're going through the hoops to get a requisition approved, then the best thing to do is hire quickly, because if God forbid the economy changes and they take the requisition away, you don't have that opportunity. And even if you get a shitty candidate, you at least have a body in there before the requisition goes away.
So we started the conversation talking about demographics, right? And this lack of employees.
Right.
And then, I have these conversations all the time with TA leaders that'll go, well, my recruiters have, 50, 60, 40 recs, whatever it means. It doesn't, it's kind of an arbitrary number, but it's a big number. And they're like, well, historically that seemed like that was fine. You're like, but you understand we're not we're not in the same history right now.
Right.
We have historic low unemployment. We have this, like, they might have been able to do 40 recs before and been successful. It might only be 20 now or 25, but we still have this mentality. So when you say, like, I don't like blame HR or TA for some of these things, I don't right now for sure, because what I figure, like, most TA leaders and teams that I talk with now are just surviving day to day.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's insane.
Absolutely.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
So, great conversation. And I don't know if within that I asked you, what surprised you about 2022?
I think, for me, the surprise has still been, and again, I'll take it back into this like this HR tech landscape that we're in for the show. We still have pretty bad marketing because the buyers are super confused.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a lack of an awareness that confusion lies there. And part of that might be, we kind of overestimate the sophistication of the buyer. If you go out and you measure the competency of a TA leader and HR leader, the lowest competency they will have consistently is technology.
Yes.
And yet we believe that they know exactly what they want and how the tech will work for them.
Right.
Instead of saying, like, hey, how do we build this out for you in a way that we can show you what's capable and what you should be doing.
Right.
And yet, like, these most of the people out here still want to go to you and say, we can do whatever you want. They don't know what they want.
Yeah.
Show them what they want.
Well, if you walk the floor, I'm not saying Tim hasn't, because Tim has definitely walked the floor. But if you walk the floor, there's so much confusion because they're all trying to use buzzwords and bullshit, pardon my French, that if I'm a practitioner and I'm walking this floor, and I did have some problems.
Yeah.
I couldn't get 10 steps without everybody saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Everything's about AI. Everything's about insights. Everything's about data.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they're all trying to solve different things, but they're all saying the same things to everybody. So there's literally hundreds, if not 1,000 or maybe more vendors here, all confusing the shit out of the people they're talking to.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I mean, it's surprising because the amount of money VC wise, like, in the spaces, I mean, I think George LaRocque said it's like the second biggest year ever, like over 10 billion year to date. So obviously there's a ton of money coming into the space, and you would think we would get better at getting right to you, where it's like, what's the actual problem? Yep. And here's how we can solve that for you, versus just, we're going to be the next shiny thing on the market,
And I'm going to applaud companies that stay in their lane.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There are some companies that stay in their lane. They do their thing. They only talk about that. I'm applauding. I'm not going to name any names, but there are others that they're, to your point, they're trying to solve world peace.
Mm-hmm.
You're confusing the shit out of your economic buyer. And you're right. They're not sophisticated. They're still in the, moving from administration to insight. They're still moving from administration to strategy. And the more you confuse them, the worse you're going to have a time for trying to get their attention.
Yeah. And again, I want to make sure people are clear. Like, I'm not disparaging our HR leaders or TA leaders for being unsophisticated.
No.
This is really advanced stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I spend, and I both spend a ton, we spend hours and hours a week just heads down in the technology, really trying to learn what it is.
Right.
And still are just scratching the surface of what's really out there. An HR leader or TA leader, they might spend an hour every quarter. That's it. And so, like, it's not surprising that they don't. I mean, most of them know the most about their own system and its capabilities, but not what's out there.
I would disagree with you that they just scratched the surface of what they literally have. And then they say, well, we are making a business case for change. And the brilliant question comes from the CIO. What doesn't your system do today? And they go, well, when we talked to the salespeople for this new thing, they said this, not understanding what they currently have.
Yes. That's why that's my push to every person that I work with on the consulting side is become a super user of your tech first.
Yes.
Then tell me what that tech doesn't have.
Exactly.
Because you're right. They can't tell you what they want or what the system lacks. All they can tell you is like, oh, well, that feature over there looks great.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's a feature. And by the way, it's not really used that much, but it looks super cool.
I had a great conversation with somebody yesterday where I said, why are you making a platform shift from XYZ company to YYZ company? And they said, well, they have some features that we really wanted. And I said, okay, so you're going to shift your HRIS, payroll, benefits, tax, time, talent, all of those HR core functions because of features. I said, are you sure you really want to do that? You're going to spend millions of dollars and upset lots of different systems and processes for that. And they're like, yeah. I mean, this is the newest stuff. This is the latest stuff. And I'm like, that seems like you're chasing the shiny nickel. It seems like
if you think about digital transformation, that's really what all these all these HR departments and TA departments are trying to do. Is most of the biggest mistake I find is that they're trying to take their current process and just overlay new technology and call that digital transformation. What they should say is like, what happens if we just scrap our entire process and we started with a blank white piece of paper?
Exactly.
How could we do this differently, better, or whatever? That's really transformational. Instead, they're just like, well, here's how this works. And you're just like, and every time I go in, I dig into the process. They're always like, yeah, our process sucks and here's why, blah, blah, blah. And usually there's a little ownership there because they're like, well, I was the one that rebuilt the process. But, and to me, what I find usually has nothing to do with HR, TA. It's a legacy kind of leader issue of saying, well, we're forced to do this because of. But then when I sit in front of a C-suite of that same company and say, why are you doing that? And they're just like, I don't know. But somebody in HR thought it was super important that that leader had that step at some point. Instead of going to them and saying, hey, this actually doesn't work for us. This is actually holding us back. This is causing a lot of waste in the system. And they would go, okay, don't do it.
Exactly. I think Chris Havrilla said there's 6 levels of why. Like you say, why are you doing that? Oh, well, we've been doing this for a long time. Well, why are you doing that? Oh, well, if you peel back the layers, it was somebody did something for some reason 10 years ago because someone made a mistake and approved something it shouldn't have been approved. So it got codified into law for that one issue, and it blew up and became the panacea.
This is a great example because we like to laugh about it and say, well, that's not us, it's everybody else. It's everybody. So I'm working with a company and I'm working with a recruiter, like going through a diagnostics and really understanding her process. And it's very typical where she's like, I screen a candidate, I like the candidate, and I say, okay, when can you interview? Then what happens? Then we have to call the hiring manager and say, hey, I have a candidate. When can you interview? They can interview. And that's best case scenario. That means that like the hiring manager trusts you that they're just they don't even have to see the candidate. Right. And I'm like, and I ask her, I'm like, why don't you have access to the manager's calendar where you just automatically say, oh, so you can do Wednesday at 3? Yep. Okay, great. I have you in.
Calendly.
And her answer was, well, I actually have that for most of my managers, but I have a couple that they refuse that access. And I'm like, and so they put in a process step because you have 2 hiring managers or a handful of hiring managers that are like, I don't want to give you access to my calendar. And I said, so here's the conversation that would take place when I come is I'm going to pull that hiring manager in. I'm going to pull the recruiter in. I'm going to pull in your CEO. How long do you think that hiring manager will stand by there? I don't want you in my calendar. It won't happen. They will say, oh my gosh, I never told her she could have access to my calendar. And for sure.
That was a misunderstanding.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. We ask recruiters all the time. I'm like, why aren't you sending emails to candidates from the hiring manager's email? Well, because they think that's their personal email. Like, no, it's a work product. I mean, this is going to be an eye opener for them, but guess what? It's not, because we already know you're going to get an 80% higher response rate from a hiring manager than a recruiter. Why aren't you utilizing that? I'm not trying to be manipulative to a candidate. Immediately, once that candidate's interested, I'm going to introduce the recruiter who's also me, in that conversation, and we'll take it real from there.
Wow. Just wow.
There's so much waste that we don't necessarily feel is waste, or we feel we can't get around it. And then the third party outsider comes in, looks at it, has one conversation, and it all changes. And you're like, oh.
But thank God that's the reason why we exist, though, too. That's how we get paid.
Exactly.
Hey, are you listening to this and thinking to yourself, man, I wish I could talk to David about this? Well, you're in luck. We have a special offer for listeners of the HR Data Labs podcast. A free half-hour call with me about any of the topics we cover on the podcast or whatever is on your mind. Go to salary.com/HRDL consulting to schedule your free 30-minute call today. let's talk about what your prognosis is. And, Dr. Sackett, put on your hat, put on your white robe, and put your badge ID for your hospital. What's happening for 2023? Where is it going? What's going to dramatically change in 4 months?
I think the hard part is like, it's hard for a buyer here to buy tech that's invisible, but the more invisible we make our technology, the better. We just need stuff to happen that nobody has to go into a dashboard or a separate system or a login or whatever. They don't see anything. It's like, oh my gosh, I have a candidate in my email who's interested. How did that happen?
Right.
That invisible tech becomes the future of what we're trying to really do. I need less people pushing buttons and pulling levers and all that within the technology,
right,
and letting that AI automation, intelligent automation kind of run behind the scenes and just get us to that point where stuff can happen. So we're starting to see that more and more. There's a lot of vendors out here that are espousing that they can kind of do that. The hard part is for a buyer or a TA leader or HR leader is they look at it and they always want to see something. I want to see the dashboard.
Right.
And you're like, that's not how this works.
Right.
This is going to pin together those 10 pieces of technology that you already have, that you've already paid for, and actually make them work the way that you believed it all would work when you put the dominoes
it's
together.
Connective tissue.
Yeah.
Yes.
And but it's all invisible to them. So they're paying a lot of money for tech they don't see. But also the hard part of that is you actually then gets back to data. You have to build that benchmark data and baseline to say, here's where we're at. We're going to pay a lot of money and put in this tech we can't see. But then we'll measure and see where we're at, right? And you'll see this kind of this growth, because that's where we have to keep going back, because what will happen a year from now, 2 years from now, someone will go, well, we don't see it. I don't even know if it's really doing anything. And you go, okay, here's where we're at. Here's where we were. One was down here, one's up here. And you have to keep going back and kind of showing them there is advantages to having all of this kind of in there.
But does that have anything to do with control and seating control? And at least with a dashboard, you get to see how the dials are moving and feel like, like if you're driving a car and the car doesn't have a speedometer, but the car knows it's going a certain, like if it's a Tesla and it's got all the automation built in.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of that we need to build out BI dashboards for our leaders so they understand. Like, you can give them the picture of that. And what I find is most leaders just want the picture. They don't really want the data. Right. Once in a while, like 1 out of 100 will want to dig in and get like their hands dirty with the data. For the most part, they want the picture.
Right.
They want to be able to send someone to, like, the hiring manager's complaining and you want to go, look, I'll show you the funnel. Yeah. Let me give you a picture of exactly what we're doing.
Right.
Right. Shut your mouth.
But the invisible, I think, is the scary part.
Yes.
Even though it's working.
Because it doesn't seem real. It's not tangible.
Right. But it's working.
Yeah.
But they just don't know it's working.
Exactly.
Wow. It's a concept. Wow. It's just doing what it should be doing.
But like, that's it's so hard for them to buy into, because usually they're like, your background check company or this company or whatever, you're actually seeing something. So then you feel like, oh, it makes sense that I'm paying every month for this piece of technology.
But I mean, I would liken it to bill pays, right? We set up automated bill pay because they just happen, right?
Yeah.
We get our paycheck, the mortgage gets paid. Maybe we get a receipt, maybe we get an email, maybe we get a notification that the transaction happened appropriately. Because now I know that the control, even though I've ceded control to the bill pay mechanism, it's happening.
Yeah. And if you had to go backwards, like bill pay didn't work, and all of a sudden you have to write the check and put the stamp on, drop it off, you'd be like, oh, this sucks.
It does. Why can't I automate this? Well, but that's what we're getting to from a society. We're actually ceding a lot of control.
Yeah.
But there are some areas of it that we still need or want or don't trust, maybe?
It's a trust thing for sure. I mean, we have a distrust for technology in a lot of ways. And so if you can't see it, you can't see it running, you're like, well, I don't know if it's running, but that's where I think we get back to the measurement side and being able to deliver that and really understand. But again, most companies don't even have that baseline to know where they're at. So you have to really kind of come in from that standpoint and show them, okay, here's what we're measuring right now and here's where you're at. And then let's go 90 days, 6 months, a year, and we'll show you this progression of how it's getting better.
But does that kind of speak to you, the fact that they haven't set what the goals were from it from the beginning? And so therefore, when they see the measures, they really don't know what they're shooting for at the end of the day?
Well, and here's this is a whole nother podcast around performance management, right?
Especially with TA, yes.
Well, and so when you think about how our measurements and what they're in their base and in the interaction with compensation, is you don't want to have necessarily black and white measures if it's 20% of your annual salary bonus, right? You want to measure that like a days time to fill, days to fill, whatever is great. If I have my measure being, I'm at 37 days to fill January 1st. If I get to 36.5 on December 31st, I get a 20% bonus.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's November 1st and I'm like at 36.9. And I'm like, uh-oh, I need to close some recs.
Right.
Oh, I'm 36.5. Look, I get my bonus.
Right.
We have to take away that kind of performance management bonus thing where it's like, look, I need to know what success looks like and how to measure success.
Right.
And let's do your bonus based on like, how about maybe business objectives, right? Maybe, margin and revenue or whatever.
Right.
And you'll get bonus on the same thing the CEO gets bonus on or whatever.
Right.
Because if you're running a great function, shouldn't that roll into, business performance?
But then we need to close the gap in understanding of the business so they understand what their piece of it is.
Yeah.
Because the line of sight to incentive programs has always killed the use of the company metrics on people who don't really understand the company metrics. And they can't understand their piece of it. So therefore they go, I don't know how I'm going to solve for margin because, what do I do? I'm hiring people and,
But it's a broken system that allows somebody to design the metric that they're going to get bonused on. You should say, no, here's the talent metrics or the HR metrics that we know equals success. And this is what we're going to measure. The only way we get through that is by decoupling that bonus with them, right? At this point, because you're saying, hey, we're going to allow you to build metrics that you're going to bonus on. You're like, oh, well, then I'm going to build mine on that. I think there'll be 50 days of sunshine next year. Like and people laugh at that, but they're like, all they're doing like, we're doing ours on hiring manager satisfaction. Well, what does that even mean? Just because a manager's satisfied with your recruiter, does that mean you're better at recruiting?
How about first year turnover for your new hires?
Well, no, and then you're like to me, the quality of hire one is the bigger one because they're like, oh, it's quality of hire, and you're like, what is quality of hire? And then isn't that really a hiring manager measure? Not really. It's not HRTA.
Yeah. Hey, listen, if we're going to talk about like crazy things for the future, let's talk about how the DE&I metrics get in there and getting diverse slates of candidates, even if it doesn't end in a hiring of a diverse hire. Yeah. Even having diverse slates. Yeah. I would love to have that metric in there, by the way, if you're listening and you're designing an incentive program.
No, I mean, I always it's funny because I'm like, your prototypical, middle-aged white guy, I actually did my 23andMe thinking, cause I was always told like my grandmother is a quarter Cherokee or something like that. Right. I'm like, I'm going to do I want to find out if I have some Native American in me. And it was 0.2%. So I'm 99.8% white guy. But yet I always feel like on the recruiting front, I could come in and actually have an immediate impact to diversity recruiting way more than somebody that is just, this is a person of color or a female or whatever. Because to me, I'm going to turn on the measures and understand where in the funnel is that falling out. Right. Where do we have that bias? Right. Where it could be an assessment, it could be in the interview process, it could be the selection. And then you have a real courageous conversation with where that bias is happening and make the change. Right. And yet we know we have the ability to do that right now today. Every person could do it. Yes. And yet we see major Fortune 100, Fortune 500 corporations continue to not make one freaking percentage point difference in their diversity hiring. Right.
It's crazy.
It's because they refuse to do hard measures on that, on the funnel. Right. Because the diversity is in the funnel. They're just not showing where it's falling out. And we know where it's falling out. Yeah. It's in that unconscious bias, right, at the selection level. Right. But they're not willing to have that conversation with that hiring manager because first thing you do is when you go to a hiring manager and say, hey, by the way, you're sexist or you're racist or you're whatever. Yeah. It's like you shut down.
Right. Well, to me, it actually goes a little bit beyond that. I look at job descriptions and say, job descriptions have some unconscious bias.
For sure. Oh, 100%.
Sourcing may have unconscious bias because are we really looking at HBCUs? Are we really looking at the neighborhoods where we'd be able to find good people who need jobs, who are fully qualified, but because they're a little bit further away and maybe it'll take them a little longer to get there, we're not doing it. But that's where we could be going to be able to satisfy that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tim, any other prediction?
I mean, I predict that we'll still have a really hard time to hire people for the foreseeable future.
Well, given the fact that we first talked about the demographics, I totally agree with you.
This is not going away.
No, it is definitely a long-term problem. And, I think we pray that we're not going to fall into a recession that makes it worse.
For sure.
Where we start talking about whether it's the job wreck versus the job loss and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we will see. We'll come back next year at this time and find out whether we were right or wrong. Hopefully, if there's no recession and we don't have an HR tech. Tim, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoy it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Take care. Stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week, and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.